Welcome to the Your Next Move podcast. Y'all, today we are talking about one of my favorite things that I actually don't think I have any content on that's out there: public speaking. If you know a little bit about me, you know that I do a lot of public speaking for a living, whether it's keynotes, workshops, facilitation. I'm an author talking about my book in companies doing L&D trainings. Public speaking has been a large part of my business and honestly in my career as well. I was known to present at conferences, present with stakeholders, big audiences, small audiences, the whole nine. And even if you don't consider yourself a public speaker, knowing how to properly articulate your ideas in public settings is crucial to your job. No matter if you have an audience of one or an audience of 1,000, it is still crucial. So I have 5 tips that I want to share with you on how to take your public speaking to the next level. So first up, embrace your quirks. Don't watch hours of YouTube trying to figure out how someone else speaks or the mannerisms they have, or trying to emulate who they are. One of my favorite stories about Oprah Winfrey is in the Making Oprah podcast, where she talks about how early on in her career, all she wanted to do was become Barbara Walters. So she did everything like Barbara did: her questions, her answers, how she articulated herself, how she stood. She made sure that she was doing what Barbara did. And it wasn't until one day when she was on air live and said, I think she said Canada instead of Canada, and busted out laughing and couldn't stop. And from that day forward, people were sending her so many messages about her level of authenticity and who she was. And it helped her embrace being herself in front of the camera. Many times when we want to master a new skill, we try to lean into what our mentors are doing, our sponsors are doing. However, embracing who you are is such a large part of that. I'm someone who likes to tell jokes when I'm speaking, and I'm probably going to laugh harder if you don't laugh, because now I'm embarrassed and I've just learned to just shake it off. It's so important that people get to see a little bit of you when you're presenting yourself or you're presenting on any topic, because ultimately you are presenting yourself. So I encourage you, figure out, what is your style? Are you someone who likes to teach? Are you someone who likes to tell stories? Everyone has a little something, a little quirk, and embracing it is going to make public speaking so much easier for you. Number 2, spend time with your audience. Many public speakers simply show up when it's their time to speak. And whenever your schedule allows for it, I always recommend getting to wherever you need to be a little bit early. Spend some time studying, getting to know the audience, taking note of what's happening in the room. Is it formal? What's the mood? How are the other speakers doing? Your observations can only help you improve your presentation. So let's say you're presenting for a larger audience, let's say 100 people plus, and it's a conference setting. I would want to be that person sitting in the back of the room. Is the audience nodding? Or are they nodding off and going to sleep? Are they people who are taking notes? Are they people who ask lots of questions? Did you see that something really had everybody going in the last presentation of the person before you? Figure out, what is their vibe? And the more you know about the audience, the more comfortable you will be. If we're talking about stakeholder presentations in the workplace, I've mentioned a few times the importance of socialization. Understanding the point of view of each person in the room, what's important to them, what's not important to them, that can help you in your presentation. Number 3, be gracious. This is especially true when you're speaking to smaller audiences. While you're this featured speaker, someone in the audience may feel like they want to chime in, especially if your presentation is super interactive and conversational. People may not wait until the questions at the end. Always thank the audience for their participation, and don't let anything, even a slightly off topic or rude comment, really ruffle you. Make sure that although you are this featured speaker in the room, you are at the head of the table, smile, carry on with your talk, and make the audience wonder how you fielded that obnoxious interaction without so much as breaking a sweat. With the level of speaking that I've done over the years, I've been berated for a typo on a slide or asked about my personal life in a Q&A that caught me off guard. Or I've fumbled my words before and had to get back on track, or seen someone sleeping in the front row. And I'm like, dang, I'm that boring? Like you can't even go to the back and sleep? You in the front and you sleeping? All of it happens when you're public speaking. However, focus on the people who are focusing on you. Focus on telling the stories. Focus on the impact that you could potentially have. Don't let the naysayers or the person who's trying to get you off your rocker. Some people love that. Some people love to just see someone get a little frazzled. Don't let those people take over your presentation. Number 4, be open to shaking things up. Learning to engage with and command authority over an audience takes practice. But when you are in front of the room, and I do not care if this is a boardroom of 5 or an audience of 1,000, make sure that you remember that you are in charge of this room. So even if people are starting to doze off, fidget with their phones, you're allowed to try something new. Have people stand up and stretch. Start asking them questions. Prompt them to start small group discussions. When you're speaking, a large part of being a great speaker is figuring out how to keep the audience engaged. And sometimes that means mixing things up. I'm one of those speakers where if we make eye contact, we're going to have a conversation. Similar to being a stand-up comedian and you talk to your front row, as a speaker, you can talk to people in the audience. You can ask for feedback. Ask them what they think. Ask them to share a story about the topic that you're talking about. Be open to changing whatever your plan was. And when we talk about changing your plan, I'll step back for a second just to talk about speaking in general and a little bit on embracing your quirks and the technicalities of speaking. Every speaker has a different way of approaching their audience and their preparation behind the scenes. I'm someone who I love to have slides. However, I don't want word for word written in the speaker notes, because that makes me anxious and it makes me feel like I have to confine and do everything exactly as it was written. With this podcast, you see I have my iPad here. I have my talking points, but what I'm saying right now is not on here at all, because I felt the need to talk about the technicalities of speaking, because so many things depend on your audience, depends on how they're reacting, what is happening, how you're feeling. You have to leave a little bit of room for that to happen, especially if you're a speaker who has to do live question and answer periods or you're speaking with your stakeholders. Last but not least, tip number 5, if you are someone who would like to improve their public speaking ability, I always recommend taking an improv class. You can never count on a presentation going exactly as planned, no matter how many times you've rehearsed it. Maybe the slides won't load, or the venue will have AV issues. Maybe the fire alarm goes off. Anything can be thrown at you while you're on stage. We had a podcast episode where the doorbell rang because Uber Eats dropped off breakfast this morning. You never know what is going to happen, but taking improv can really help you roll with the punches and be able to still have an amazing performance. I always recommend Googling your local community center or your theater group in your city, or just look up improv classes on Eventbrite. It'll help you practice keeping your cool under pressure. Those exercises that are like yes and. So someone's telling a story, they'll be like, well, you know what? I was going to the grocery store and I picked up bananas. And the next person has to say, yes. And after I got those bananas, I realized that I really needed some milk, but I think I left my child in the car. The next person would say, yes, and thank goodness they were okay because the windows were down and I forgot that my husband was coming to the car to make sure that they were okay. And the next person, yes, and. Those exercises allow you to stay on your feet when questions are coming, when new things are happening. That's the biggest part of being an impactful speaker. So to recap, no matter where you are, I want you to embrace your quirks. Remember, when you are on the stage, this is you. They are having you on stage for a reason. Be yourself. Spend time with your audience to get to know their norms, their likes, their dislikes, their interests. Be gracious, even when you're being tested, because when you speak a lot, you will be tested. Be open to shaking things up and doing things just a little bit differently than you initially expected to. And last but not least, feel free to take an improv class to help you brush up on your skills and being able to think on your feet and adjust to the needs of your audience. Public speaking is an art that must be mastered for professionals in the workplace. Again, it doesn't matter if you're speaking to one person or you're speaking to 1,000. Communication and being able to speak in a more formal manner is needed. So with this, may your next move be your very best move. Until next time.